While strategy isn't always my strongest point, shut up, we don't all have tactical brains, okay? I still do love a good grid-based tactical RPG sometimes. They often remind me of the bygone days of my youth playing Final Fantasy Tactics Advance on my computer via an emulator, my GBA. Definitely my GBA. A disclaimer, I actually do have a copy that I played for hours on my GBA, but sometimes I just wanted to see everything on a bigger screen, dagnabbit. So yeah, a bit of a soft spot for that sort of game, which is exactly what the Obsidian Prince is, and with enough of its own style and quirky charm to make it stand out from the crowd. Before I get into the review, I want to give a big thank you to Gameclaw Studio and Unleash the Giraffe, yes, that's the actual name of the dev team and I love it, for providing a copy of this game in exchange for an honest review. I also want to say that if you enjoy this review and want to see more of my reviews and other videos I make, then go ahead and subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, like the video, any combo of that good stuff that lets me know I'm doing something worthwhile here. And now with that out of the way, on with the show. So, the idea behind this game is that the titular Obsidian Prince has messed up the very fabric of reality and caused all kinds of chaos in the world, and it's up to you, a merry little adventurer, to set things to rights and send him back to the underworld where he belongs. And you know me, I love me some deep lore and cool stories in games, but I also sometimes enjoy just turning my brain off and hacking and slashing my way through waves of enemies. And the Obsidian Prince actually caters to both desires. There's the campaign mode where you can progress through the story, though honestly, it's kind of easy to forget that there is an overarching story sometimes, and that the game isn't just a series of vaguely connected quests. You have your main character, as well as other characters you can recruit and set up as different classes when you have the setup to train them. And there's also a roguelike mode, which plays, well, more like a roguelike. You go as far as you can through waves of battles and floors of dungeons, you eventually die, and your accomplishments pave the way for the next hapless fool, brave adventurer, to have an easier time when they take on the challenge. So whatever you're in the mood for, the Obsidian Prince kinda has you covered. First thing you're gonna notice about the game, the adorable voxel graphics. I can't say this is a look that I'm always down for, but it's also not one that I'm particularly against. All depends on how it's done and how it works when combined with gameplay and other aesthetic choices. But I think here it works. It adds to the kind of quirky flavor that the game really leans into and embraces. It's cute without being cutesy, and fits right in with the sort of catch-you-off-your-guard humor that I found all over the place while playing. Because there really isn't one main thing that sets the Obsidian Prince apart from many of its contemporaries. What gives it its own flavor is how everything combines. I honestly can't think of any game that hits all the same points that the Obsidian Prince does. There might be some, sure, but none immediately come to mind, and that's a good thing. One thing I've learned about game design recently is that if your game clearly takes heavy inspiration from another game, especially one that's already popular and well established, then all you're doing is inviting comparison, and it's going to take a lot to make people think you shine brighter than that other star. But if you take pieces that you love from this game, from that game, and combine them into something new, then that game is likely to stand out on the merit of being something people haven't seen before. I mean, it's not like individuality is all the Obsidian Prince has going for it. The gameplay really is solid, and I like the visual style and the humor, as I said. But the creative combo helps a lot, and the fact that I can't think of another game that has that combo makes this one stand out and get attention. Before I get into the rest of this though, I want to draw your attention to the game's music. It definitely fits the quirky but appropriate feel of the game, so no complaints there, but okay, every time I hear the start menu music, my brain just immediately goes to this. You're welcome. Now, I'll grant you, the majority of my time playing the Obsidian Prince was spent in campaign mode, so that's what I'm most familiar with here. Roguelike mode works a bit differently, which I'll get into later. But for the campaign, you start off with one character, default name Bob, because is there any more default in name than Bob? Anyway, Bob is a warrior, and it's his job to go fulfill some quests that can range from fighting slimes, fighting rats, fighting bandits, you get the idea. Fairly standard early game hero stuff. The dungeons you traverse can vary in size depending on the quest. Some have only a room or two, others have multiple rooms and branching pathways. Though the branching pathways honestly don't matter, since you can leave one room at the very end of a hallway, do some stuff down the other end, and then go right back to the room you didn't check in the first place. It's all just clicks on a map, it's not actual corridors you have to walk down or anything. Pretty much every room has a variety of enemies to face off against in turn-based grid movement combat, with attacks being limited to the squares around you if you're using a melee weapon, to more distant squares if you're using a chakram or bow. Defeat the enemies, gain loot and experience, move on. Nothing too out of the ordinary here. But the Obsidian Prince adds another feature to make it that much more unique, and that is deck building. Like, a deck of cards. Not to the degree that the original Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories had, but cards you have in your hand do play a role in how the battle will play out. Some cards provide passive effects that are active so long as you're holding it. Others provide additional effects that will only activate when you use a certain move, like being able to knock back enemies when you do a roundhouse attack. You get 3 of these cards per turn, and they're shuffled out regularly, so there's no guarantee that the card you want will come up when you actually want it. You very literally have to play the cards you're dealt. But there are also backstory cards that get attached to your little fighting avatars too. Most of them are positive, and you get to select 3 of them at the beginning of each dungeon floor battle. Attack boosts, restoring health and armor, additional effects to certain attacks. There's a decent amount of variety. You're limited in your total number of backstory cards, so this is where the deck building aspect really comes into play in my opinion. If you want your deck stacked with cards that can restore your health or energy or armor, making sure you go into each battle as strong as you can, then you can prioritize those cards whenever the option to choose new ones comes up. If you'd rather have additional attack effects or strength boosts, then that's also an option. Honestly, I love this, since I tend to build my characters with 2 main focuses: doing a lot of damage and keeping myself alive. I don't care so much about bonus effects or any of that stuff, though I know it can be useful. But I vastly prefer to stack my deck with recovery cards and attack boosts, and my playstyle makes that work. I like the added bit of customization, and it makes even the same class potentially play differently for different players, depending on how they build their backstory deck. But it's not all good. Die in battle and your character gets an injury backstory. For me, it was nearly always a broken leg. Honestly, not sure how much variety there is to these detriment cards, because my Bob just had a tendency to trip over stuff when he was running away, I guess, and got his leg smashed up in the process. Clumsy Bob. But the injury creates a debuff, and there's always the chance that not only will it come up as one of the potential options when you're picking your backstory cards, and if it does, you can't unselect it, but if your deck is full, you might have to scrap a valuable card to replace it with your injury. After a while, you can discover a hospital where these injuries can be treated for a fee. It won't get back whatever card you had to drop in order to take on the injury, but at least it won't hamper you in battles anymore. That being said though, the battles aren't exactly super complex. There's some variety in gameplay, or eventually different job classes you can use, but in my experience, pretty much every battle can be managed with your most basic attack. No need to get super into strategies, no need to plot and plan for every potential encounter. I smacked my sword into whatever came close to me. Done. If a couple of things came into range at once, it was fun to use my roundabout attack and damage them all at once, but that was a fun little dopamine boost, not really a requirement to manage the battle. Ditto using my chakram to hit enemies that were further away. It made the battles go by more quickly because I didn't have to take turns moving to them square by square, but I never found it was a matter of do or die, a mechanic I absolutely needed to make use of or else I'd break my fricking leg and have to start the dungeon over again. This did make it great if I wanted to just chill and kill some enemies without putting too much brain power into it, mind you, so I'm not totally opposed to the simplicity of it, but those looking for deep tactical combat might find the Obsidian Prince rather lacking. Now, campaign mode doesn't really have the roguelike elements that, well, roguelike mode does. Campaign mode might see you die or, well, get injured, but your progress through that dungeon isn't saved, and your character's traits and equipment don't get handed down to the next adventurer. You lose some money, break your leg, and then get right back to it. Same as any tactical RPG, really. But roguelike mode operates on the same grid-based combat with Voxel Graphics, only it's... Okay, I'm not sure how many more times I can say the word roguelike before it feels like I'm beating you over the head with it. It's roguelike. You see how far you can get, then you try again, trying to push a little further, get a little stronger, make your next run a little easier. All the key elements of a roguelike. Any semblance of story gets thrown right out the window here, and it's not like campaign mode forced story upon you with wild abandon. But here's where you can try out different character builds, tweak and refine strategies, and play against yourself, so to speak, trying to beat your previous record in a mode that really doesn't have an end. it continues for as long as you want to continue. And as I said before, I really like that the Obsidian Prince has different modes that you can play with. It almost feels like you're getting 2 games in one. The same aesthetic and 99% the same mechanics throughout, but with enough difference between the modes that there's a greater appeal to a different audience, pulling both in. And that's no bad thing. I can think of a few games that could benefit from this sort of dual mode setup, and especially something like this, where there's a mode that doesn't really end. I mean, how many times have we all played an awesome game with mechanics that we really loved and really resonated with us, and then we beat it, but we still kind of wish we were playing it, because we were having so much fun with the actual act of playing. Not in advancing the story or reaching a certain endpoint, but just the simple enjoyment of playing the game. And yeah, if that game doesn't have a post-game, we can always just start it all over, but maybe that's not quite what we're in the mood for. Maybe we just want to keep having fun with the gameplay, the mechanics, the battles. Pretty sure a number of you know what I'm talking about. So you bring in something like the endless roguelike mode, and blammo, there's the answer to the problem. You can beat campaign mode, experience all that it has to offer, and still know that you can enjoy the experience of playing the game without needing to start the story campaign from the beginning again. Sure, this wouldn't work for every game, but it definitely works here, and I appreciate that. The Obsidian Prince might not be the most story-rich, might not be the most mechanically deep, but it definitely scratched an itch for a particular kind of gameplay, and I enjoyed my time with it. And unlike some games I've played and reviewed here on this channel, I can easily see myself returning to it in the future. There's still more of the campaign for me to tackle, and I know roguelike mode is going to keep me entertained for a number of hours to come. So if all of this makes the Obsidian Prince sound like the sort of tactical RPG you'd enjoy, then give it a go. I've linked to the Steam page in the description below. There's unfortunately no demo, so you can't exactly try before you buy, but there's some good gameplay examples on YouTube and Twitch right now, so you can get a more unedited look at the game to see if it's really right for you. For what it's worth though, it definitely comes with my recommendation, and I hope you enjoy it too.